and accept that they are putting my best interests forward during these conversations and the deliberations. So no, I haven't asked my father to intervene.
It began with a paradox. The man who once offered sanctuary may now hold the power to destroy everything that sanctuary represented. When Tyler Perry opened his Los Angeles mansion to the exiled Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the world saw an act of compassion. A Hollywood titan extending his hand to a royal couple cast adrift from the monarchy. But years later, that same act of mercy stands at the center of a storm threatening to dismantle reputations, expose hidden motives, and test the limits of loyalty. How does a savior become a potential saboteur? How does a friendship built on trust evolve into a weapon of truth? Back in 2020, the world was still reeling from the shock of the royal exit. The Sussexes had abandoned the palace gates for the promise of freedom across the Atlantic. The British press called it Megxit, a modern abdication laced with scandal and defiance. Amid chaos, one man emerged as their guardian, Tyler Perry. He offered them his home, a sprawling $18 million estate in Beverly Hills, complete with armed security and absolute privacy. To the outside world, it appeared to be a haven of peace, a fairy tale refuge after years of turmoil. Yet behind those gates, something far more complex was unfolding, a series of whispered deals, digital communications, and strategic conversations that would later define the power struggle between truth and perception. Perry was not merely a friend offering a roof. He became a silent architect of the Sussexes' transition from royalty to celebrity. Insiders described hours of consultations, how to manage media optics, what stories to tell, what details to omit. Emails and voice messages reportedly chronicled those early days of planning, as the couple sought to build a new identity in the world's most unforgiving arena, Hollywood. Perry's network opened doors. His reputation gave them credibility. And yet that trust was never equal. For every act of protection, there was an expectation of discretion, a mutual understanding that what happened within those walls would remain sealed. But secrets never stay buried forever, especially in an era when image is currency. Years later, when Perry found himself entangled in a massive $260 million workplace misconduct lawsuit, the silence from the Sussex camp was deafening. There were no public statements, no messages of support. Photos once proudly displayed vanished from official accounts. Mentions of Perry disappeared from Meghan's lifestyle content. The man who once sheltered them was erased from the narrative as though he had never existed. Was it strategic damage control or something more dangerous? The more one examines the pattern, the clearer it becomes. Silence in this world is never accidental. Legal insiders suggest that an agreement may have existed, a confidentiality clause with specific triggers tied to loyalty. If Perry was ever publicly cut off or disassociated, he would be released from the obligation to stay silent. If true, then the quiet deletion of his name may have been more than PR housekeeping. It might have been a legal misstep that unlocked a vault of secrets, and those secrets, if real, could upend everything. Reports circulate that Perry possesses recordings and documents from the Sussexes' early months in America strategy sessions for Netflix drafts of press statements and voice notes discussing how to frame their story for maximum sympathy. Imagine the implications if even fragments of those files emerge, an empire built on authenticity suddenly exposed as a product of branding. Every emotional interview, every confession about trauma and liberation would face renewed scrutiny. Was it heartfelt truth or performance art designed to captivate a global audience? The narrative is cinematic, but the stakes are painfully real. Social media has become the new court of public opinion, dissecting every detail. Users trawl through archives, comparing timelines, noting inconsistencies between documentary claims and verified events. Hashtags like Tyler Knows All and Lilibet Truth gather momentum daily. Former supporters confess to betrayal. Skeptics sense vindication. In the echo chamber of the internet, perception mutates faster than any fact can catch up. The transformation of Tyler Perry from guardian angel to potential whistleblower marks one of the most startling reversals in modern celebrity history. It reveals how fragile the scaffolding of reputation truly is. One person's silence, once considered loyalty, may become the fuse that ignites a public reckoning. And beneath all the glamour, The multi-million-dollar deals, the curated photos, the interviews staged for catharsis, lies an uncomfortable question. What happens when the storyteller loses control of the story? From sanctuary to scandal, the arc has been swift and merciless. What began as a tale of freedom and redemption now flirts with themes of deceit and exposure. If Perry chooses to speak, every carefully constructed image could unravel in seconds. In the high-stakes theater of fame, truth is not a shield but a weapon, and the man who once offered refuge now holds it firmly in his hands. The shift began not with a whisper but with a lawsuit. When Tyler Perry became entangled in a $260 million legal battle over alleged workplace misconduct, the headlines were explosive. It was not merely another Hollywood scandal. It was an event with ripple effects reaching far beyond his studios. For the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, whose bond with Perry had been celebrated as a symbol of chosen family, the lawsuit represented more than uncomfortable publicity. It was a turning point, one that exposed the fault lines beneath their alliance and raised unsettling questions about loyalty, reputation, and survival in a world where silence can be as loud as speech. Perry had long been seen as untouchable, a media mogul who built an empire from nothing, championed Black filmmakers, and owned one of the largest film studios in the United States. His public image was synonymous with resilience and faith. Yet in early reports of the lawsuit, former employees described a toxic environment of mismanagement and misconduct. Whether true or exaggerated, the accusations drew immense media attention. Suddenly, journalists revisited every partnership Perry had ever formed, including the one with Harry and Meghan. The Sussexes, who had built their own brand on moral clarity and emotional honesty, now found themselves in a moral bind. Would they defend their friend, the man who once gave them refuge when the world turned against them? Or would they protect their own image by maintaining distance? The decision came swiftly, though quietly. Within days of the lawsuit's emergence, all public traces of Perry began to vanish from their digital ecosystem. Mentions of him in archived posts disappeared. Photographs that had once shown warm gratitude were replaced with curated lifestyle images, smiling children, manicured gardens, and carefully neutral captions. The erasure was almost surgical. Observers noted the pattern and began to question the motives. For Meghan and Harry, perception has always been survival. Their narrative of authenticity, the honest couple who broke free from royal restraint, relied on maintaining moral high ground. Associating with a figure under investigation risked compromising that narrative. But in choosing silence, they may have triggered something far more perilous. Insiders familiar with the situation have whispered about an agreement, perhaps informal, perhaps contractual, binding both sides to discretion. Perry's silence during the early days of the royal exile had not been coincidence. It had been courtesy, possibly secured through legal means. If the Sussexes were ever to sever ties publicly, the protective veil could fall away. The lawsuit itself provided a stage for speculation. Some journalists questioned whether Perry's defense strategy might involve evidence or communications that, while unrelated to the legal accusations, revealed deeper insights into his private dealings, including those with the Sussexes. That possibility transformed the legal case from an isolated scandal into a potential domino effect. Suddenly, entertainment insiders began speaking of encrypted emails, encrypted calls, and messages stored in secure servers. The question was no longer whether Perry would speak, but when and under what circumstances. The public's fascination grew with each passing week. Social media users began connecting the dots between the timing of Perry's lawsuit and subtle changes in the Sussexes' behavior. Online forums tracked every post, every deleted photo, every new PR initiative from Meghan's rebranded lifestyle projects. To the casual observer, these shifts might have seemed routine, but to those following the saga, it looked like crisis management. The synchronization between Perry's legal troubles and the Sussexes' digital transformation was too precise to dismiss. The silence surrounding the case carried its own narrative weight. For a couple who had once declared their mission to speak truth to power, their refusal to comment on Perry's ordeal appeared contradictory. It cast doubt on the values they had so carefully marketed. Critics argued that their moral compass was selective strong, when convenient absent when costly. Even sympathetic commentators found themselves uneasy. Could the champions of transparency truly afford to stay silent when their closest ally faced public scrutiny? Meanwhile, inside, Hollywood curiosity turned to tension. Media executives began whispering about what Perry might do next. Would he release a statement clarifying his side? Would he quietly settle and move on? Or would the immense pressure, both legal and personal, push him toward revealing more than anyone anticipated? The idea that Perry held a trove of sensitive information about the Sussexes was no longer dismissed as rumor. It became a topic of industry speculation. His involvement in their early American years, from providing shelter to advising on media strategy, made him an eyewitness to their transformation. If the lawsuit gave him any reason to protect himself, those archives could become leverage. Through all this, the Sussexes maintained a serene public facade. Meghan appeared in stylized photo shoots. Harry attended charity events. They smiled, waved, and spoke of healing. Yet behind the soft lighting and neutral tones, a quiet panic seemed to linger. The world they had meticulously built, a hybrid of philanthropy, entertainment, and moral leadership, depended entirely on control of narrative. But now a single external variable threatened to unravel that control. The irony was inescapable. The same legal system they had often relied upon for protection from privacy violations, media defamation, and personal intrusion now empowered another party to potentially expose their secrets. The lawsuit had changed everything. What began as a distant scandal now loomed over their empire like a storm cloud, waiting for the right wind to burst. In this collision of law, loyalty, and image, the stakes extend beyond fame. What is truly at risk is the concept of truth itself, the version of reality sold to millions through interviews, documentaries, and public appearances. If Perry's silence breaks, every carefully curated word will face re-examination. And as history repeatedly shows, the public is far less forgiving of manipulation than of mistake. What began as a friendship has now become a legal labyrinth. At the center of this storm lies a rumored clause, a single line in a private agreement that could shift the balance of power overnight. Legal sources whisper of a non-disclosure agreement between Tyler Perry and the Sussexes, one designed not merely to protect privacy, but to ensure narrative control. Buried deep within it, they claim, is a conditional escape hatch. If Perry were ever publicly disavowed or erased from association, the confidentiality would no longer bind him. If true, Meghan's digital silence, the quiet removal of posts, the vanishing of photos, the absence of acknowledgement, may have inadvertently freed Perry to speak. And if he speaks, the repercussions would be seismic. The entertainment industry runs on secrets. Contracts, image rights, recorded conversations all exist in tightly guarded vaults of legal precision. But the Sussex-Perry dynamic was different. It was not a corporate collaboration, but a hybrid of friendship and strategy. Perry had been privy to the most intimate moments of their transition, from the final days of their royal duties to the first hours in California. He offered advice on press management access to key media contacts and guidance on navigating the unforgiving terrain of American celebrity culture. In return, he received trust, or something resembling it. But trust, when bound by paperwork, ceases to be emotional. It becomes transactional. Reports claim that Perry may have preserved extensive records of his time assisting the couple. Not gossip, but documentation. Emails, texts, voice notes, even recordings of late-night conference calls. Many of these communication sources say involved discussions about shaping public perception. What tone should Harry strike in interviews? How should Meghan address the monarchy without alienating American audiences? When should the Netflix deal be announced to maximize sympathy and viewership? These were not casual exchanges. They were strategic rehearsals for a new identity. The existence of such materials has long been whispered in entertainment circles. For years, they were dismissed as exaggerated rumors, the kind of myth-making that always surrounds celebrity controversy. But now, with Perry potentially free to defend himself publicly amid a $260 million lawsuit, those whispers carry weight. If he releases even fragments of these communications, the world would witness how modern media empires are crafted not through authenticity, but through meticulous calculation. It would strip away the mystique of sincerity and reveal the mechanics of image-making. The irony runs deep. The Sussexes' global influence was built on a promise of transparency. Every interview, documentary, and podcast carried the message of unfiltered truth, the courage to speak one's story. Yet behind that idealism was a machinery of brand management carefully tuned to the algorithms of sympathy. If Perry's archive exists, It might contain the blueprint of that machinery evidence of scripted emotions, staged vulnerability, and strategic silence. The rumors grow darker still. Some insiders allege that among Perry's files are recordings of early planning sessions for the Netflix series Harry and Meghan, including discussions on what angles to emphasize and which royal figures to portray sympathetically. Others mention voice memos in which Meghan allegedly rehearsed answers for interviews, not fabrications, but refinements designed to ensure emotional impact. If such material were ever published, it would not only embarrass the couple, but also threaten contractual relationships with major platforms. Netflix, Spotify, and publishers could face legal and ethical scrutiny for distributing potentially manipulated content marketed as documentary truth. The question then is not only what Perry possesses, but why he has kept it. Some believe it was self-protection, a form of digital insurance in an unpredictable industry. Others suspect he foresaw potential betrayal and wanted leverage. In Hollywood, loyalty often lasts only as long as the headlines are favorable. And as the Sussexes distanced themselves, Perry's legal peril grew. To the public, his silence seemed noble. But to those who understand the inner workings of celebrity ecosystems, silence is rarely altruistic. It is currency, one that gains value the longer it is preserved. The internet has become the speculative courtroom. Threads dissect timestamps of deleted posts. Users compile collages comparing Meghan's early statements about Perry with her later avoidance. Journalists analyze the possible language of NDAs, wondering whether the Sussex lawyers underestimated their former ally. The hashtag #NoshPerry files trends, sporadically fueled by digital sleuths convinced that the filmmaker holds the ultimate proof of hypocrisy. Even mainstream outlets begin hinting at the possibility, careful to cloak speculation in phrases like sources close to the situation. Yet beneath the intrigue lies a deeper moral tension. If Perry truly possesses those materials, is he ethically justified in releasing them? Does truth outweigh privacy? For years, the Sussexes framed their journey as a struggle for narrative sovereignty, the right to define themselves outside institutional control. But now, that same philosophy could be turned against them. If they believe in owning one's story, then by their own logic, Perry owns his. This is the trap of the NDA, a paradox of protection. It promises secrecy but breeds suspicion. It binds allies but eventually erodes trust. Once the balance tips, every clause becomes a weapon. For Perry, breaking silence could mean legal retaliation, but remaining silent could mean perpetual association with controversy not of his making. For the Sussexes, silence is equally dangerous. Every day without clarification deepens public doubt. In the court of global opinion, perception has already begun to shift. The former godfather, the former guests, the former friends, all are now characters in a slow-motion collapse of credibility. Each headline draws the audience closer to the heart of the question, what is truth, when everyone has receipts? As Perry's legal counsel reportedly reviews communications and timestamps preparing a potential defensive strategy, the stage is set for revelation. One leak, one email, one recording, and years of controlled storytelling could disintegrate overnight. In a world addicted to exposure, the man who once gave them shelter might soon deliver their reckoning. The empire of image had been built with precision, a modern fortress of public relations storytelling and emotional choreography. For years, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex cultivated a brand that fused sincerity with spectacle, vulnerability with control. Every frame of their Netflix series, every sentence in their memoirs, and every podcast soundbite was designed to sustain a narrative of authenticity. Yet behind the glossy production, there existed an invisible machinery. At its center stood the coordination of messaging, timing, and tone. It was this machinery industry insiders now say that Tyler Perry helped assemble. And it may be that very machinery which he is now positioned to dismantle. Hollywood operates on illusion, but the Sussex operation elevated illusion to art. Meghan's carefully curated photographs, the warm lighting, neutral tones, and symbolic backdrops were not spontaneous glimpses into private life. They were orchestrated impressions designed to evoke empathy. Every public appearance coincided with moments of tension, a royal announcement, a critical headline, a lawsuit, or a major deal. Each time controversy threatened a new image, appeared a smiling family picnic, A charity visit, a child's birthday celebration timed to soften the public's mood. This rhythm of reaction and distraction became the pulse of their media empire. Tyler Perry's alleged involvement in those early strategies explains why his silence has become so dangerous. He knew how the stories were constructed, what was omitted, and how emotion was monetized. If he releases even fragments of those communications, the delicate line between personal narrative and performance art would collapse. The world would see not just the couple's vulnerability, but the architecture behind it. And for public figures, whose greatest commodity is authenticity, exposure of that architecture would be catastrophic. To understand the magnitude of such a revelation, one must look at how the Sussexes' image evolved. Their post-royal identity depended on moral clarity, the courage to stand up to an outdated institution and reclaim their freedom. The Oprah interview symbolized that moral victory. But beneath the emotional surface, producers and PR specialists had sculpted every transition, every camera angle, every word. The audience saw a confession. Behind the scenes was curation. The same applies to their Netflix series, where moments of intimacy were framed not as glimpses, but as narratives designed to elicit sympathy, outrage, and global engagement. It worked brilliantly at first. Contracts poured in, media partners lined up, and brands aligned themselves with the couple's cause. In the digital economy of virtue, authenticity sells. Yet, as Perry's possible disclosures loom, those partnerships appear fragile. What happens if proof emerges that authenticity was staged? If the compassion marketed to millions was in part a commercial construct? In such a scenario, emotional honesty ceases to be a virtue. It becomes a commodity tainted by deceit. Observers have long noted the signs of calculated storytelling. The synchronized release of Harry's memoir Spare Meghan's podcast archetypes and coordinated public appearances created a continuous stream of controlled visibility. Their personal brand was no longer simply royal, it was cinematic. But like every cinematic production, it relied on editing, and editing always conceals. The question that now dominates public discourse is whether those edits cross the threshold between interpretation and manipulation. As speculation grows, public sentiment has begun to fracture. Some defend the couple, arguing that every public figure curates image, that even transparency requires production. Others feel betrayed, believing they invested emotionally in a story that may have been partially manufactured. The emotional economy that once sustained the Sussexes now risks collapsing into skepticism. And in this unraveling, Tyler Perry's potential voice looms like a thunderclap. Insiders close to Perry describe a man both measured and methodical. He has not rushed to speak nor engaged in social media theatrics. Instead, he reportedly consults legal teams' reviews, archived materials, and considers his own reputation. This silence is not absence, it is calculation. In the entertainment industry, timing determines impact. Should Perry decide to speak, he would not merely deliver gossip, he would deliver evidence. And evidence in the court of public opinion is the ultimate spectacle. The possibility of those revelations has sent ripples through Hollywood. Producers, investors, and brand executives now reassess their affiliations. The Sussexes' commercial appeal, once grounded in moral leadership, begins to appear volatile. Partnerships that depend on trust hesitate. Streaming platforms reportedly monitor sentiment metrics, evaluating whether association enhances credibility or threatens it. This is not tabloid conjecture, but the language of business perception translated into profit. The Sussex narrative, a tale of defiance and freedom, risks being reframed as a parable of ambition and control. In that reframing lies the true climax of this unfolding story. The couple who fought the monarchy to escape manipulation may now face accusations of constructing their own monarchy of image. The court they once defied has been replaced by another, the digital public, whose judgment is immediate and relentless. Amid this chaos, Perry remains a paradoxical figure, part witness, part catalyst, part moral mirror. If he chooses disclosure, his revelations could reshape the entire discourse around celebrity authenticity. He could expose how easily modern audiences confuse emotion with evidence, confession with truth. But if he stays silent, he retains the aura of restraint, perhaps protecting both his own legacy and theirs. Either path leads to consequence. For now, the cinematic tension persists. The Godfather has become the ghost in the narrative, unseen yet omnipresent, holding the keys to a truth that could rewrite modern celebrity mythology. The climax approaches not through confrontation, but anticipation, a slow tightening of the lens as the audience waits for the inevitable scene, the moment when silence ends. The fallout arrived not as an explosion, but as a slow, unstoppable erosion. Reputation, once the most secure asset of the Sussexes, began to crumble under the weight of speculation. The internet, which had once served as their amplifier, now turned into a relentless courtroom. Every deleted post, every missing reference to Tyler Perry, every polished photo of Montecito Calm became evidence in a digital trial of authenticity. The couple's greatest strength, the ability to control narrative, was now slipping away pixel by pixel, post by post. Hashtags that once echoed support: Sussex Squad, We Believe, Her, Yicker, Harry Speaks Truth, gave way to new digital movements like Nah, Lilibet Truth, Tyler Knows All, and Receipts Don't Lie. On TikTok, creators dissected timelines and juxtaposed clips from Netflix interviews with archived statements. On Reddit, analysts examined inconsistencies between Harry's memoir and Meghan's press appearances. Across YouTube, commentaries multiplied, comparing the Sussex strategy to corporate PR playbooks rather than raw confession. The internet no longer functioned as an echo chamber. It had evolved into a cross-examination. The result was devastating. Public trust, the lifeblood of their global appeal, began to wane. Influencers and journalists who once championed their cause now expressed hesitation. Even sympathetic voices in American media, the kind that once shielded the couple from British tabloids, started using cautious phrasing, alleged inconsistencies, reported contradictions, sources suggest. These small linguistic hedges signaled a shift more damaging than direct criticism. They reflected doubt, and in the age of perception, doubt is fatal. The first visible consequence emerged in Hollywood's executive circles. According to reports from industry insiders, several production houses began delaying or quietly reviewing upcoming Sussex-related projects. Brand partnerships entered pause mode, awaiting the outcome of Perry's legal situation. Endorsement discussions that once leaned on their image of compassion and moral leadership were abruptly postponed. Corporations understand risk better than emotion, and risk had now become synonymous with their names. Meanwhile, Tyler Perry's silence grew more potent with each passing week. The absence of denial, the absence of confirmation, both served as fuel. His team reportedly fielded offers from 3 major networks for exclusive interviews, each worth millions. The curiosity was not limited to tabloids, but extended to reputable media giants that framed the potential expose as a cultural turning point. It was no longer about celebrity gossip, but about the anatomy of modern truth. For the Sussexes, every public gesture became a test. When Harry returned to the United Kingdom for what insiders described as private legal matters, speculation ignited. Was he consulting lawyers? Was he negotiating a preemptive settlement? Meghan, meanwhile, stayed behind, carefully curating her digital presence with soft focus imagery and uplifting captions. Yet instead of admiration, her followers responded with skepticism. "Where is Tyler Perry?" One comment read beneath a photo of sunlit flowers. "Why the silence?" another demanded. The comment sections, once places of affirmation, now resembled interrogation transcripts. Inside, Montecito sources claimed strategy meetings intensified. Publicists, legal advisors, and crisis managers worked in overlapping cycles, monitoring sentiment, drafting contingency statements, and preparing for every possible outcome of a Perry disclosure. The tone of the response was critical, too defensive, and it would confirm guilt; too dismissive, and it would seem arrogant. The art of reputation management had never been more delicate. Yet the more they tried to control the message, the clearer it became that control itself was slipping. In the broader cultural conversation, the controversy sparked something larger than royal intrigue. It became a case study in the mechanics of modern influence. Viewers began questioning not just the Sussexes, but the entire ecosystem of celebrity storytelling. How much of authenticity is real, and how much is narrative engineering? When public figures monetize vulnerability, does empathy become exploitation? These were not cynical questions, they were moral ones. For millions who once saw the couple as symbols of liberation and honesty, the emerging contradictions felt like betrayal. As mainstream outlets cautiously covered the unfolding situation, late-night hosts and satirists joined the fray. Comedy sketches depicted a fictional Perry flipping through classified Sussex files, while news anchors debated the ethical limits of NDAs. The line between scandal and spectacle blurred completely. Even Buckingham Palace, which had maintained dignified restraint, reportedly observed developments with quiet interest. To the monarchy, every misstep of the exiled couple seemed to validate the decision to let them go. Public sentiment oscillated between fascination and fatigue. For those who had defended the couple passionately, this was an uncomfortable reckoning. For their critics, it was vindication. Yet amid the noise, one truth stood out. The relationship between fame and trust had changed forever. In an era where everything can be recorded, deleted, and resurrected, narrative ownership is temporary at best. Still, the most chilling aspect remained the uncertainty. No leaks had yet been confirmed, no recordings had surfaced. The damage was inflicted not by evidence, but by anticipation. The audience no longer needed proof. The mere possibility of exposure was enough to erode belief. Tyler Perry, without uttering a single word, had become the most powerful voice in their story. The once united triangle of friendship, gratitude, and protection now lies fractured. The Sussexes' global narrative, built on courage, pain, and redemption, faces its harshest test. And as the digital storm intensifies, one question echoes louder than all others: can a brand built on truth survive even the perception of deceit? In the final act of this unfolding drama, the reckoning has taken on a tone of inevitability. The silence surrounding Tyler Perry's vault of alleged recordings remains unbroken, yet its mere existence has redefined the landscape of trust. For the Sussexes, once heralded as global icons of authenticity and moral courage, the question is no longer whether their narrative will survive, but what version of it will remain. The empire they constructed was built not on monarchy, but on media. And in that world, perception is both throne and executioner. The story began with a promised liberation from an oppressive institution, a new beginning defined by transparency and empathy. It resonated because it mirrored a universal human yearning for freedom and reinvention. Yet as the years unfolded, the narrative evolved into something more fragile, a fusion of fame, commerce, and personal trauma packaged for global consumption. When Perry extended his help in 2020, few could have imagined that his generosity would become the catalyst for the couple's most dangerous challenge. The sanctuary that once symbolized safety now looms as a vault of potential exposure. If even fragments of Perry's alleged material exist, emails, voice notes, strategic memos, they would confirm that the Sussex story, far from being a raw expression of truth, was also a calculated performance. Not a fabrication, but a choreography of emotion. That distinction matters, yet to a disillusioned public, nuance often dies in the storm. The risk is not simply reputational, it is existential. The couple's entire platform, humanitarian influence, commercial partnerships, and media ventures depends on one fragile commodity: credibility. And credibility, once fractured, is rarely restored. Behind the scenes, advisors reportedly focus on containment, not confrontation. Crisis consultants study online sentiment graphs, watching trust metrics decline in real time. Legal teams debate the limits of enforceable confidentiality. Publicists weigh whether a proactive statement might reignite sympathy or amplify suspicion. Every decision carries risk, every silence invites speculation. The tightrope between truth and survival has never been thinner. Meanwhile, Perry's team maintains calculated restraint. In the entertainment industry, timing is an art form, and silence is often the most strategic move of all. If he speaks now, he controls the story. If he waits, he magnifies suspense. Every passing day transforms speculation into mythology, ensuring that when the revelation finally arrives, if it arrives, it will command the world's undivided attention. That awareness gives Perry a power far greater than revenge control of narrative equilibrium. In this climate, public emotion oscillates between curiosity and exhaustion. The saga has transcended gossip. It has become a mirror for society's obsession with storytelling itself. Audiences once drawn to tales of resilience now question the sincerity of every celebrity confession. Was the era of empathy always a transaction? Has vulnerability become the new form of currency? In the shadow of these questions, Harry and Meghan's image has begun to shift from pioneers of transparency to symbols of the danger of overexposure. The consequences extend beyond headlines. philanthropic partners grow hesitant, wary of aligning their causes with uncertainty. Streaming services driven by data calculate engagement drop-offs and sentiment volatility. Publishers eye contracts with renewed caution. The market of morality, the one in which the Sussexes once reigned supreme, has begun to price doubt higher than loyalty. This is how modern influence dies, not with scandal, but with skepticism. And yet amid this storm, there remains a haunting irony. The Sussexes' original message about control, privacy, and the right to define one's own story was never false in spirit. It was the execution that blurred the line between empowerment and manipulation. They sought to reclaim narrative power from institutions, yet became institutions themselves. The same machinery they once opposed now operates in their image, defending their legacy through algorithms and contracts rather than truth. If Perry speaks, his revelations could permanently reshape perceptions not just of the couple, but of celebrity culture itself. It would expose how modern fame functions as a negotiation between emotion and entertainment, sincerity and strategy. But even if he stays silent, the damage has already been done, not through fact, but through faith. When belief collapses, evidence becomes unnecessary. As the world watches the story enters its slow descent, the quiet aftermath where myth fades and reflection begins. The Sussexes now face the paradox that defines every modern public figure. In seeking to own their truth, they may have lost it. Tyler Perry, once the symbol of salvation, remains the silent witness to their transformation, a man holding history's unlit match. The reckoning may not arrive through revelation, but through introspection. The real consequence will not be a leaked file or viral headline, but the gradual erosion of trust that follows when authenticity turns into performance. In a digital age where every narrative is monetized, perhaps the final question is the simplest: who, if anyone, still tells the truth? And for viewers following this saga, another question lingers. What would you do if the friend who once protected your secrets became the keeper of your undoing? Thank you for watching. Share your thoughts, your perspective, and your questions below. Do you believe silence can still protect truth, or does it only postpone it? Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and remember, every story has another side. The story of Tyler Perry and the Sussexes is no longer just a tale of friendship and betrayal. It has become a lens through which to view the modern age of curated authenticity. Once Perry's Beverly Hills mansion represented sanctuary, a symbol of compassion when the royal couple faced global scrutiny. Yet years later, it stands as a haunting metaphor for the price of trust in a world where every kindness is recorded and every secret can become leverage. As Perry's $260 million lawsuit unfolds, whispers of a hidden clause, one that could free him from silence, have sent tremors through the Sussex narrative. Alleged recordings, strategy emails, and confidential notes from their early Hollywood transition threaten to expose not malice but manipulation. What began as a story of freedom has evolved into a cautionary parable about control. The couple who escaped the institution of monarchy may have built an empire just as rigid, one governed by media optics rather than crowns. Public faith has fractured. The hashtags that once defended the couple now question them. Corporations that once chased partnerships now calculate risk. The audience that once wept for their pain now demands proof of their sincerity. The scandal, whether real or potential, has shifted the axis of celebrity culture, revealing that the line between emotional truth and strategic storytelling is vanishingly thin. And then there is Perry himself, the guardian turned ghost, silent yet omnipotent, holding archives that could redefine reputations. His restraint, deliberate and watchful, has become the loudest sound in this modern tragedy. Whether he speaks or not, he has already altered the narrative simply by existing at its edge. In the end, this is more than a royal controversy. It is a reflection of our collective complicity in the spectacle of sincerity. A reminder that truth, once commodified, can never again be pure. The Sussexes sought freedom, but found fame, sought authenticity, but found exposure. Tyler Perry gave them shelter, but may yet hold their undoing. The cameras are still rolling, but the script is no longer theirs to control.